Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night. I hope that everyone's having a great start to their week. There's a ton of stuff that has happened, obviously, an absolute ton of stuff that has happened inside of Ukraine, and a ton of stuff that's just happened all over the globe. But unfortunately, what that means is a lot of this stuff, generally speaking, just isn't good stuff. It's very kind of depressing. It's not very uplifting overall. And it's a lot of war and conflict and death and famine and rebellions and revolutions and economic crises, political crises, all of that fun stuff. Now, luckily, thanks to you guys as a community, we're able to actually do something about that, though. And that's because you've allowed us to be the news that gives back. Every single stream that we do and everything that we do regarding this channel is 100% for charity. We are never pushing super chats or merchandising or anything like that. We all, when we started this, there's a group of us that started this together, and we all collectively agreed, because we had worked for another YouTuber, and we all collectively agreed that we didn't feel that profiting off of other people's suffering was all that great. So we wanted to do nothing but charity. So when we get large enough, every stream will be it will just be a fundraiser on every single stream. You're never going to see super chats. And until that point, and even after that point, if you check down in the video description, you're going to see a ton of different links. All of these links are 100% verified organizations for us, or verified individuals who we have gone through our own vetting process for and independently vetted them. And 80% or more of all the proceeds that you guys give to these guys as a donation all actually go directly to their programs or to whatever they're donating for. So, for instance, we have one individual down there right now who is actually he's a foreign fighter inside of Ukraine, and he is actually getting money in order to buy new medical vehicles. Theirs were actually destroyed. And on top of that, if you don't want to give to individuals, there are plenty of organizations out there. In fact, we have so many that we weren't able to list a description with these organizations. So please be sure to check all of that stuff out. Please be sure to give as much as you can to this stuff. If you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us and help us continue this endeavor. You guys are the main reason we're able to do this, and we can't thank you enough for the support that you've given, not just to the channel, but even more so to the organizations themselves. So thank you very much in that regard. And so, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the news. I please implore you guys to ask questions. A lot of this stuff, especially when you get into geopolitics and what's happening in a war zone, can be very frustrating to understand. It's very difficult to understand. I was in the Marine Corps myself. I was an infantryman in the Marine Corps, so I can answer some of these questions at a tactical level. But I can't answer them at a more larger strategic level. But I will give my best to help you understand. So feel free to ask, and I will answer to the best of my abilities. But with that, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And the first thing is that we need more. So President Zelensky has pleaded for the West to help out even more and to speed up the assistance that is coming into the country, because at this point they're looking truly to try and wrap up this thing and try and get this offensive into the oncoming weeks as they're trying to really get this into Ukraine's favor by the winter, because the winter means that a lot of the land is going to there's going to be a lot of permafrost in that. It's going to make it easier for tanks to really move around the theater for the Russian forces, which is really good for the Russians because they are all about high mobility, high maneuverability within their warfare structure. And you see that in the makeup of the BTGs. The Russians don't actually even have light infantry. They're 100% a mechanized and motorized force, and they use heavy amounts of artillery, as we obviously on the front. But this period, because the approach of winter is winter, cooler temperatures and harsh conditions will slow down the fighting, which is beneficial for the Russian Federation. Therefore, Ukraine is calling on the United States to provide urgent assistance in the coming weeks. And that's true, because in the next few weeks, things are really going to change in Ukraine. I mean, we're getting here at the very end of July. It's not very long until that, wintertime, that fall and winter starts setting in here. Unfortunately, for my delight, because I'm not a big fan of the fall or winter, but still, there is a ton of stuff that's happening. So, and they can't really. It's going to be very difficult to fight. Just like everything else, the winters in Eastern Europe are terrible. Napoleon found that out. The Germans found that out. The Ukrainians and the Russians already know this. And slowing down the fighting, at least for Ukraine's part, isn't a good thing. And giving that maneuverability on the permafrost is only an advantage to the Russians. And so William Young says the best time in war for assistance is yesterday. So while an accurate statement stressing urgency always is beneficial as well. That's 100% true, William. It really is. So Ukraine was receiving assistance in some limited quantities. They're receiving assistance and training. I actually have friends in the Marine Corps that actually went over and helped train Ukrainians how to fire things like the anti-tank missiles. So like the javelins. And, but it's not usually enough. It wasn't really preparing for this large of a war, and I don't think anyone was prepared for this. I don't think anyone can really, despite the rhetoric, but despite everything, I think everyone was hopeful when it comes to Europe, and I don't think that we as the West, because I'm going to guess and say if you're watching this, you're likely a Westerner, but I don't think that anyone was truly prepared for what was getting ready to happen, and when it did happen, I think it kind of caught everyone off guard, and unfortunately, while we can look back in time and we can see that, well, the signs were kind of obvious, hindsight is 2020, and we have to kind of put our best foot forward at this point, and we have to, deal with the repercussions of our inactions at this point. As we jump down here into Kharkiv, we really start getting into the main bit of the war here. I mean, when you're talking about Kharkiv, you're talking about going down, further south and into the Donbass. That's really the meat and potatoes of this war. That's really when the majority of this war is getting fought. And we take a look at Kharkiv, and the situation here in all of Ukraine makes one thing clear, and that as long as Russia exists, and as long as the political entities within Russia, as they exist now, continue to exist and persist throughout the I almost said Soviet, throughout the Russian ideology, in the political realms and military realms, there will always be hostilities now between Ukraine and Russia. There will always be hostilities. And Ukraine, at least the city of Kharkiv, understands this, being on the border. And so, after going through the tremendous amount of shelling, when they plan on rebuilding the city, they have already devised a concept where they reimagine the bus stops inside of Kharkiv. And they're not just bus stops now, they are reimagining them as bomb shelters. So if artillery begins raining on Kharkiv again, citizens can actually take shelter within these bus shelters. And just take a look at their concept here. It's literally just a bunker. They literally are planning on putting bunkers built in on the side of the street as part of the bus stop. Now, if this is how you have to plan your city, something has gone terribly wrong. And unfortunately, the reality is that in Europe, and that in Ukraine especially, once again, that the conflicts will always be there. You can't. It doesn't matter how good relationships, how good or how poor or however. It doesn't matter if you had family in Russia, or if you were Ukrainian living in Russia or Russian living in Ukraine. It doesn't matter what kind of brotherly love may have existed there between Ukraine and Russia. That's gone. 100% that is gone. That is destroyed. You're not going to get that back again. There is no coming back. The relationships for Ukraine and Russia are forever tainted. And Kharkiv, being on the border, now has to plan for a possible eventuality that may persist. This may not be the only invasion that Ukraine sees in the 21st century. They want to prepare for this. Now, while something like that does not necessarily protect against a direct hit, though I hope it has some kind of resistance, at least against smaller munitions, it 100% will protect against things like shrapnel or whatever else, which is mostly what a bomb shelter is for. But we also see why they need this, because the Metallist stadium here in Kharkiv was hit by Ukrainian by Russian missile strikes. Russia continues to shell Kharkiv on the daily. They have no regular or standard conventional artillery systems within range. No BM-21s can hit it. No DPK-30s can hit it. Not even the longer range artillery pieces can hit it. They're 2S7 peons. They can't hit it. In fact, they have to use Iskander-M ballistic missile systems that are fired out of Belgorod, which is inside of Russia, just across the border here. And that is the only way they're able to hit Kharkiv. It's no longer a strategic or tactical. It's no longer tactically or strategically viable for the Russian Federation to even attempt to take Kharkiv. They don't have the forces, they don't have the supporting assets within this region to make another grab at Kharkiv. It just cannot happen. And if they were going to, it would have been earlier on in the war. At this point, all they're doing is they're just terrorizing the civilian population. That is all this is doing. We know they're not hitting military targets. We know they're not doing any real damage against Ukrainian military infrastructure, whether that's their command and control or supplies. No, this is all 100% just a terror game, and you can see that here. So this is the Ukrainian Medalist Stadium. This is just outside where those shells did impact. We can see here this appears to be one of the subway stations coming out of here, and we can see here where the large impact crater is. When we're talking about Iskander-M missiles landing in Kharkiv, we're talking about very big pieces of ordnance. I mean, huge bits of ordnance. And that's not the only place. Chuihiv here, as we move further south, Chuihiv was once again hit with rocket attacks. Chuihiv is one of the more major cities here along this kind of border area between Ukrainian and Russian lines. And what we see here is that, quote, rocket attacks on the city of Chuihiv in the Kharkiv region on July 25th. 3 people remain under the rubble of a destroyed cultural center. The rescue operation is ongoing, and that's coming from Oleh Subinov, who is the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. But that's fine, because Ukraine decided to return the favor. They may not be able to continue that sustained bombardment of Chuihiv very long, as another ammunition depot was destroyed. According to the Strategic Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed a field ammunition depot with Russian troops in the Kharkiv direction on July 26th. And you're going to see that very often. You're going to see that very much back and forth between Ukraine and Russia when it comes to their artillery bombardments. And that's really the theme of this day, because artillery bombardments have rocked pretty much the entire front rather significantly. We've seen several amounts of major bombardments against Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian infrastructure over the last few days, many of which are rather significant strikes. They're extremely large. And we've had some very big developments when it comes to the ongoing war inside of Ukraine as a result of those. Jump over here into Izium. It's an immense amount of death here, as according to Valery Marchenko, who's the mayor of Izium, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, about 500 Ukrainian citizens have died in Izium in the Kharkiv region due to shelling of Russian troops and the lack of medical care. And we see that pretty much consistently within occupied areas. The Russians just don't give anything to Ukrainian citizens. There is whatever humanitarian aid that you hear about, it's either extremely minimal, it's either propaganda, or if it actually arrives, it's crap. I mean, we've seen some of the photos coming out of places such as Mariupol, where it's molded bread and shovels. Molded bread and shovels. And we'll get you an update here on Mariupol here very shortly, just so we can continue into that just a little bit further. But as a little bit of uplifting news out of Ukraine, someone found a very cute thing with a dog. It's just a fantastic boy relaxing with his humans. Just on the front lines. We just wanted to throw something in here because this stuff gets depressing really quick. Especially when you come back and you have a day off and you're like, oh man, oh yes, a little bit of peace from the war, thank God. And then, and then all of a sudden we get, death and destruction, and here's a good boy. So for you guys here, here's a good boy. Fantastic good boy. Now, I have a fantastic little story to kind of go along with this. When I was in Syria, we had a dog, and the Special Forces guys were not very happy about the dogs because they weren't happy about the stray dogs because they messed with military working dogs. And they were kind of a nuisance for them. And some of them were very aggressive, too, at least in Syria. And we had a dog that we were walking the post one day, and he's this big dog, but he had his ears kind of like half clipped off by ISIS. He's this huge dog. I mean, he's probably about the size as this one. And he came out with us to our post one day with me and my post partner. And then from that point on, he just kind of followed us around. Like every day he'd come out if there was like, because we had a hole in our wire, unfortunately, where we were at on that post. And he was, and he would actually follow us out, and he would bark at anything that would be moving around in that hole in the wire. So it actually alerted us to a couple of ISIS guys that were out there scoping the place out. And we used to give him water and food and play with him. He was adorable. He was an absolutely adorable dog. And luckily we got, there was actually a program, the Army guys who were with us, we weren't allowed to get the dogs home, but they were. And we were able to raise 10 grand so we could get that dog. And he's currently living a nice peaceful life somewhere in like Montana at this point. So awesome bit of news. But he was our company mascot. I loved him. He was an awesome dog. But yeah, so having cute dogs is always a nice uplifting part in a war, because who doesn't love a dog? I mean, come on. Like, I used to be as a child like terrified of dogs, but I still love them. Like, I just love animals, but that's my personal thing. I have a terrible time anytime I watch animals get hurt or anything. But hopefully that's a little bit of uplifting before we get back into the dark and depression. And that's because here in Bakhmut, another school's been bombed. School number 10 here in Bakhmut, which sits right there on the lines, is actually supposed to be one of the axis of advance for Russian forces as they're getting ready to push and try to do a large encirclement within the eastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. And they have destroyed yet another school, essentially. So, take a look. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge crater. I don't think the school is entirely destroyed, but it certainly is damaged. You don't get this kind of ordnance and not have something be severely damaged. Russian forces continue to shell across the entire front once again. And what is happening in Bakhmut, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Kostanivka, Chasiv Yar, all of these places are getting precursor bombardments. And really what that is doing is it's setting the stage for Russian ground forces to be able to move into these areas and soften up resistance, demoralize any troops that may be there, as well as any civilians who may want to resist Russian occupational forces, and so that way they can more easily move into here. Russian doctrine heavily relies on artillery and the mechanized and motorized warfare. And so we're going to see these precursor bombardments across the entirety of the front. They're not going to lighten up unless Ukraine can continue to destroy those ammunition depots and, even more importantly, destroy those artillery systems. Russia is still pulling more and more equipment, and we actually have some of that too. But they are pulling more and more equipment into this fight, and they're continually trying to replace those losses. The issue is that with every equipment loss that you're incurring, you're also incurring troop losses. Every tank destroyed means which means a dead tank crew. And those guys have to be trained how to operate a tank. These guys have to be trained how to operate artillery, at least at a basic level. It's not something you can just pick up. It actually takes a lot to understand artillery and tanks and everything else. So with that kind of a loss, I mean, you can't just take your average Joe and say, get in tank and shoot. Like, it's not like a rifle. Like, anybody can shoot a rifle, realistically. Anybody can shoot a rifle. Not everyone can pilot a tank, and not everyone can command a tank, and not everyone can command artillery. And so they're having a significant manpower losses in general, and losses to specialized equipment is really what's going to put them at a dead end when it comes to the battlefield, I think. And we, of course, get our daily update in Donetsk. Usually it's 24 hours ahead, but since we're covering 48 hours worth of news, we at least get yesterday's update, and that is because Russian aggressors, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles in the Donetsk region on July 25th. 3 people were killed and 8 citizens were injured. And that's coming from Pavlo Korolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Once again, Ukraine also got some back as they decided to hit a oil depot here. This is in the Bodanovsky district of Donetsk, which is the city of Donetsk here in the Donetsk Oblast. That is occupied by the Russian forces, but hitting an oil depot is a little bit different than what we normally see. We normally see them hitting ammunition depots, but vehicles need oil and fuel, and hitting these things definitely degrades that capability. See, not only are they destroying the ammo at the front lines, but they're also making sure that the trucks can't get any more ammo there either. And so that's where this is going to start to cripple their supply infrastructure. And I mean, it's a huge fire. I mean, it's a raging fire. According to the Russians, the Ukrainians hit this with a HIMAR. They claim everything's been hit by HIMAR in this day and age, so I don't know if that's true, but it could lend some credibility to it. Ukrainian Excalibur rounds from their 155s could also hit that, and those are also precision-guided munitions. So, but it's a toasty fire. So if anyone has marshmallows, please invite me. And here's something that I spotted that I figured was very interesting to talk about, because something that gets talked about a lot with the Russians, but not so much with the Ukrainians, is the degradation of their equipment. And being an anti-tank missileman, this really hit me because I understand what has happened and what this means. So we have a photo here, and this is, I'm going to say, of a Metasim tube. And that is obviously the Javelin. And you can see that's the BCU on top. I mean, it's very obviously a Javelin system. Now, I was a Javelin anti-tank gunner. I was also a TOW anti-tank gunner, so that's very similar to the Metasim, except that's the American version. So that was my actual MOS in the Marine Corps. I was an 0352. I was also fully cross-trained as a machine gunner, but this is my bread and butter. And when I see something like this, it's really telling, because this is a failure of the weapon system. What this likely is caused by is by a launch motor rupture. So what does that mean for the average person? Well, inside of a missile, you have several different things, and you have a launch motor, and you have for the Javelin, you have a launch motor, and then you also have a flight motor. But you're just going to have the one here for the Metasim. But what is happening is you have something on a Javelin. It's on the end of the tube down here. It's hidden by the forward end cap. And what it is it's a desiccant plug, and it measures with color coding the different amounts of humidity inside of the missile tube. I don't know if the Metasim has it. I have never operated the Metasim, but I can assume it does. Now, operating in a place like Ukraine, especially if you have them out of the carrying case, which actually seals them in there with O-rings and everything, what happens over time, regardless of how secure it is, we had missiles go bad in Syria, but there is, if humidity gets inside of the tubes of Javelins or any kind of missile, what it does is it degrades the ability for the missile to actually operate. And what can happen is, because of the humidity inside of the tube, this is just one cause, but because of the humidity inside of the tube, what ends up happening is, if you don't properly store this stuff, the humidity degrades the missile itself, and it can cause what's called a launch motor rupture. The launch motor rupture happens when you go to fire the missile, and it detonates inside of the tube. Usually that means it's next to the wearer, and the flight motor is going to be closest to that individual. Judging by the damage done to the Metasim here, and judging by the damage done here, this is the aft portion of the missile, this is the forward portion of the missile, so the seeker and the main warhead charge is here. I'm going to say that likely what has happened is these have both suffered launch motor ruptures, and that has more than likely killed the operator of the weapon system. And it has also, obviously these things aren't but it won't launch itself. It doesn't launch. It basically just detonates in the tube. The missile motors explodes, and it's catastrophic. I've seen one video of it actually happening. They showed us in training when they were teaching us about this effect, and the individual did not survive, to say the least. This is something that I actually told my friends, like, if this happens to me, and I survive, like, praise whatever you believe in, and then just kill me, because it's quality of life I wouldn't want to have. So, but that is what happens when a missile isn't cared for properly. It's catastrophic. You have to keep good track of your gear. You have to keep your gear maintained. I joked about, these guys suck. Like, he's shoving his rifle in the dirt, like, during the firefight on Friday, or not Friday, but Sunday. And I talked about that kind of stuff in how terrible it was. But, that happens to everyone. I mean, even in the United States, it's happened. And you got to be careful about what you're doing. You need to maintain your gear. You need to take good care of your gear. You need to take better care of your gear in combat than you do yourself, because your gear is going to save your life. These guys, obviously, I don't think checked the missile, or their missiles, to make sure that they were good. They didn't do the proper checks for them before they took them out on this mission with them. And as a result, it was probably deadly for their operators. And this probably was preventable. I would say. This is probably preventable. So, there are any Ukrainian servicemen from one missileman to another. Please be sure to check the desiccant plugs. If it's pink, it's not good. Okay, blue's great, white's all right, pink stinks. Just don't mess with it unless you absolutely have to, because this is what happens when it goes wrong. Now, as we continue over here, another major ammunition depot was destroyed by the Russian Federation. We actually have a really good view of this. So, looks like this one was hit by HIMARS missiles, just basing off the accuracy. But just take a look. So we can see here, we see some Russian troops over here as they're walking into this compound. Look at that. Yes. Now that's a crater. See? There it is beforehand. And after. At least they didn't put this one in a major civilian population for once, because that's usually the case for the Russians. But yeah, that's a big crater. That's a huge crater. Like, that's a lot of it. Like, by the way, there's no way those two guys lived. There's no way. They're gone. They're probably just dust. Because that's a huge detonation. I mean, huge. That's an ungodly amount of ammunition. Jeez. So, yeah, another ammunition depot destroyed. You gotta love it, folks. You just gotta love watching this stuff blow up. Just because explosions are awesome, of course, but I mean, what that means is, how much ammunition had to have been held there? I mean, that's just a ton of stuff that isn't going to be used. Like, that stuff never going to be shot at the Ukrainian forces. Like, ever. Like, that's not going to be shelled. Like, those rounds are never going to be used to shell Ukrainian, like, cities and stuff, which we see the Russians do daily. Like, that is so many people that are not going to die because of that strike. It's impressive. And it's not the only thing. We see Ukrainian helicopters operating very heavily throughout here in the Donbass. Over the last few weeks, over about the last couple months, honestly, we've seen a very big uptick when it comes to Ukrainian Air Force activity, both jets and helicopters, and they continually are getting more. They're getting spare parts. They're getting donations from nations that have the MiG-29. Right now, they're talking. The United States is debating on whether or not they're going. The Congress is currently debating. It's in committee, I think, right now. They're debating on whether or not they're going to have Ukrainian pilots come over and train on American and NATO aircraft like the F-16, F-15, F-18. And they're going to also talking about providing those aircraft after they complete that training to Ukraine, which would give them a huge advantage over Russian Air Force aircraft. I mean, huge. I mean, it doesn't mean they're impossible to shoot down. I mean, you don't have to look at any further than just Bosnia for that. When a U.S. pilot was shot down in Bosnia during the breakup of Yugoslavia, but I mean, it's still a huge advantage. I mean, numerically the losses are so small. It's insane. So hopefully that goes through. But in the meantime, the Ukrainian Air Force still is doing amazing work here on the front lines. In fact, we have a couple of videos today of where they've been operating. In fact, this first one is going to be them. Nope. There's going to be a couple of Mi-8 AMTSHs, which is the armed version of the Mi-8 helicopter. And they are currently going through and they're conducting some rocket runs on Russian lines. Take a look. So there's that first one. He does that high angle attack where he fires those missiles. And there goes the second one. Obviously very clearly marked as a Ukrainian helicopter. And this one's probably going to do the high angle attack too. But I mean, this guy is, you want to talk about nap of the earth flight. Yeah, there he goes, high angle. You want to talk about nap of the earth flight. I mean, these guys are low. These are some very, very impressive pilots. Very impressive pilots. Now, you see both sides doing that high angle attack. And a lot of people are questioning, like, why do they do this? Well, it's because man pads are a thing. Very early on, the Russians learned very well that man-pads, or man-portable air defense systems, are extremely, extremely effective. I mean, how many times have you seen Russian jet shot down in Ukraine, Russian drone shot down in Ukraine, Russian helicopter shot down in Ukraine, video after video after video, photo after photo after photo? Well, the Ukrainian Air Force really doesn't want to make the same mistake. And, both sides are employing anti-air defense systems, and both sides do have air defense man-pads. The Russians, I'm sure it's not as heavily advertised. The Ukrainian helicopter gets shot down, but it does happen. I believe we know of at least 2, I want to say, that got shot down over by Mariupol, trying to conduct a resupply mission. But they do this high angle attack because it gives them a longer range. It's less accurate, but they're firing all of their rockets all at once. They're firing their entire rocket pod. So just like hitting an area with a BM-21 Grad, they're going in there and they're doing a high angle attack. They're saturating an area with explosives, putting it in a general vicinity, and they also train to do this. This is something they train to do. There's a way to do it to make it more effective. And Demise FPS says, imagine if the U.S. if the U.S. transitioned those pilots to Apache gunships. Well, I mean, it'd be pretty cool. I can imagine it'd be really effective, but the Apache, as much as everyone loves the Apache, or even the Cobra is really cool too. But they are a flying tank, but even in Iraq, Apaches were shot down. So I don't think helicopter versus missile. Well, first of all, you can't bail out of a helicopter all that easily. And I don't think Apaches are probably going to do any better or going to fare much better than the Ukrainians are at this point in time, if I'm going to be honest. They have better sensor pods, but all it takes is that one guy getting lucky. And you can say the same thing about the Ukrainian helicopters, but I think they're doing just fine with these. I don't think there's anything that an Apache would be able to do much better. Maybe just different types of ordnance, but they'd be limited. Hellfire missiles would be really cool. I'd love to see Hellfire missiles get employed by the Ukrainians. Why see a tank and hit it when you can just use a Hellfire missile? No, but that's not the only one. We have an Mi-24 Hind operating here on the front lines too. And once again, you can see he's got these rocket pods here. He's going to do that high angle attack once again. You can see he's firing. Basically, he's jettisoning his entire payload, and then he's going to immediately pop flares, and he's going to do a hard break. The reason for this is that's going to throw off any missiles that may have already been fired at them, hopefully, and it also means he's immediately disengaging from the area, and he's going to be able to turn and burn. Especially when the Mi-24 Hind, the loss of that aircraft would be extremely significant for the Ukrainians. It's one of their few attack helicopters that they have, and the Hinds, affectionately known as the flying tank by all of their pilots and crew, is a very effective aircraft, not just for being the fact that it is an amazing attack helicopter, but it's also an amazing transport helicopter. As you can see by the windows here, this thing can actually carry troops into combat. So, it's a very effective helicopter. But it's yet another good bit of footage coming here from the front lines. Jump down here to Mariupol real quick, where we get to check out, we have a couple of updates. First of all, improvised showers. Fantastic.
Смотрите, как сделана душевая кабина. Или что это? День добрый. Это у вас душевая такая, да? Просто баллон, туда наливаете воду, да?
I just want to point out, they had so many empty artillery cases that they were able to build an entire, like, outbuilding with them. just wanted to point that one out. Also, the jobs that are being provided. So, Russia is basically incentivizing your humanitarian aid if you're in Mariupol, which I don't think is how humanitarian aid goes, but basically, they're like, well, we destroyed your city, and we don't have enough equipment or anything to clean it up, and there's a lot of rotting corpses everywhere. So you're going to make your city look nice, and in return, we'll feed you. We'll not feed you much. It'll probably be infested with maggots and moldy, but we'll feed you something, which is better than the nothing you have now. And what it is they're cleaning up the city, and they're filling in bullet holes in, like, walls and stuff. You can't make this shit up. You cannot. So first of all, this is your bus stop. I'm surprised there's a bus left, to be honest. Like, the fact that there's still a bus is amazing. And then, yeah, here's a couple of dudes. Yeah, they're fishing on a destroyed bridge. And then here you go. Yes, for food and water, you get to, what's that? Fill bullet holes in a wall. Fantastic. Nice. That's what humanitarian aid is. You can see all the, just the situation here in Mariupol is just god-awful. I mean, like I've said before, to have died in the Battle of Mariupol was lucky. You were lucky if you had died, because the immense amount of suffering you have to go through as someone who survived the Battle of Mariupol is inconceivable, almost, in its scope. It's terrible. And reportedly, according to some confidential sources that we have that are there in Mariupol, there's little to no medicine in this city, to the point that people are beginning to die of medical conditions, including diabetes. So the situation continues to just deteriorate inside of Mariupol. I don't think we'll ever see it get any better. Jump up here into the north, where here in Stepnohirsk, which is in the Zaporizhia Oblast, just on the Ukrainian side of the line here, more than Thanks to the UN, more than 50 tons of aid has arrived into the region. That in a neighboring village is also going to be getting some humanitarian aid supplies. However, it wasn't destined for this part of the Zaporozhye region. In fact, it was destined for Poloi, which is to the south in occupied Zaporozhye. And the thing is that being under Russian occupation, they were unable to pass into the area. In fact, as we pull up the UN's official report, the statement by the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, they said, yep, we brought this, yet due to ongoing hostilities, we cannot reach there. We have not been able to deliver any assistance to non-government controlled areas since the start of the war. The United Nations in Ukraine has not delivered a single thing of humanitarian aid and has not been allowed to deliver any kind of humanitarian aid to occupied areas within the war zone. Think about that. The UN, if Russia allowed it, the UN could deliver humanitarian aid to Mariupol. Thousands of people wouldn't have to starve to death. And all it would take is, yeah, come through the checkpoint. You're a humanitarian aid convoy. That's all it would take. Like, that's it. That's the entirety of it. It's a humanitarian aid convoy. It's allowed to pass. That's it. That's all it would take. But yet, we're over 5 months into this war. Yet, due to ongoing hostilities, we could not reach there. We have not been able to deliver any assistance to non-government controlled areas since the start of the war. This is the official statement from the official UN website from the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Asnat Lubrani, regarding their convoy to Stepnoyarsk. This came out yesterday. This is their official statement. So, what's Russia's game plan? Well, complete consolidation of their holdings, and when you deny humanitarian aid, like from the United Nations of all places, the United Nations, which you're a part of, if you're denying humanitarian aid like that, there's only one thing you're doing. Especially in a war zone. Your purpose is probably to kill the people that you're occupying. To literally slowly starve them to death. Which for Ukraine, for the people in these occupied areas of Ukraine, this would be the second time in their history that this has happened. Because the Holodomor was the first. Under the Soviet Union. That's not the only thing regarding the Zaporozhye Oblast. As we come down here to Vasilivka, quote, Russian troops have been blocking evacuation of Ukrainian civilians from the temporary occupied territories at the checkpoint in Vasilivka in the Zaporozhye region. 5 people have died there this week. And that's coming from Ivan Fedorov, who is the Ukrainian mayor of Melitopol. So not only are they being restricted from leaving, which is a violation of the Geneva Conventions, the United Nations cannot provide humanitarian aid, which means that that's also a violation of the Geneva Conventions. We can just continue to add these things to the tally. Ereva's Xiang asks, why is it so hard to get aid to Mariupol? Is it that Russia does not allow it? Yes. That is exactly what the problem is. Russia isn't allowing any humanitarian aid convoys into the conflict zones, into the areas that are occupied. They are, quote-unquote, providing aid to the occupied areas under international law and obligations. In reality, we haven't really seen that. We've seen a couple times where they provided humanitarian aid, which was some water, not very much, some water, some moldy bread, and it was some shovels, so that way they could dig themselves out. That was for Mariupol. We obviously see them putting people to work, and that's how they are getting allotments of food, which is not how humanitarian aid works. In case you didn't know that. Work for food is not humanitarian aid. Wow, that's not very humanitarian of you. Who would have thunk it? And then also, we've seen them strike humanitarian aid locations. So we know that they are actively attempting to really disable the ability to provide any humanitarian aid to these locations. They're denying them at the checkpoints. I mean, just think of just the evacuation of Mariupol at the Azovstal. Think of how long it took for that to happen. And it was only a limited quantity of people. Really. And they shelled during that. They shell humanitarian corridors. Like, they forcefully deport people. Like, it's just a terrorist state. Like, it's literally just a genocide done poorly. That's all that's all the war in Ukraine is. It's just a genocide done poorly. In my humble opinion. It's not even ethnic cleansing, because they're preventing people from leaving, and that is the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide. Like, preventing people from leaving is genocide. That's the deciding factor. Ethnic cleansing, you just kill everyone you don't want there and repopulate, but if the people leave, then so be it. Preventing people to leave the occupied areas and forcefully deporting them, yeah, that's just genocide. Like, that's just, like, that's the defining thing between the two. It's just the fact they suck at it. Like, but anyway, that's why they're not letting humanitarian aid, because you don't feed the people you're trying to kill off. That's, at least don't feed them a lot. Like, that's, like, even in concentration camps, they had food allotments. Not very much, but they had it. They made sure those people suffered. And Russia is ensuring that too. We jump down here to Melitopol, where we see equipment destined to the front. We see more equipment from is moving through Melitopol, headed up into the Kherson Oblast, which we'll get to here in a moment, because I don't think it quite made it. But we can go ahead and see some of this equipment here. I see babushkas out there to say goodbye to the Soviets. 100% she watches Russian TV. Yeah, I know, right? The thing is that when you're talking about the war in Ukraine, normally when you're talking about separatists, or you're talking about the people that would back Russia, even within Russia, are normally older generation. In a general concept, and this isn't always true, right? But in a general concept, if you're older, You're more conservative. If you're younger, you're typically more of a liberal in ideology, and that seems to be the case across all world. Yeah, they're blessing the tanks. But by the way, those are all BMDs, and those guys are most certainly dead. Like, paper would be better armor than a BMD. Just saying. But the thing is that they are, in general, that's kind of how it goes. The older generation within Ukraine and within Russia would remember the Soviet Union. The 90s for Russia were considered, and for all countries that were former Soviet blocs, is really considered a very difficult time in a lot of their minds, and especially if you were more successful within the Soviet Union. So a lot of older people remember the difficulties immediately following the collapse of the Soviet Union, especially within Russia, and before the rise of Putin. So things like Boris Yeltsin, which was a terrible look for the newfound democracy of the Russian Federation. He had some issues and some big controversies. Being a drunk was a big one. And it's so people look back at the Soviet Union with nostalgia. At least they were kind of successful under that. And that's mostly the older generation. They also don't. The older generation in general doesn't use a lot of VPNs or anything, so they're not getting international news or anything. They're just getting it from the state, which they grew up with because they lived in the Soviet Union, so they got everything from the state. And so it's just kind of this perpetual echo chamber, essentially. The younger generation, even if you believe in it, your parents won't. And that's kind of the situation with Russia. It's just kind of an echo chamber. The older generation is a much easier to sway in Russia, just because of the memories that they have. That's why they changed the anthem back to the Soviet Union's anthem, the Red Anthem, and everything else. It's so usually, yes, you'll see the older generation going to be more supportive, saying their house hasn't been bombed yet. Jump down here. This is in Novolichivka, which is right here on the border between Crimea and the Kherson Oblast. And what we see is actually a major fire is raging somewhere in here. And we don't know what's been hit, but what we do know is that a large shipment of rail cars carrying Russian equipment and vehicles has arrived in the city at the time of whatever has happened here. Likely, I'm going to likely say this is probably a HIMARS strike. It's pretty deep into this territory, so that's about the only weapon system I can think of that Ukraine would have that would hit this far, unless they're using a drone system. But we can go ahead and take a look here. So as you can see, there's the equipment. Yes, all the nice fresh invasion markings. That's all going to get trashed here soon. And then, of course, you can see the fire happening right behind it, and there's smoke coming up from it. So, not quite sure what has been hit here at this point. All we know is that there is Russian equipment there, and we know that there appears to have been a strike or sabotage or something to have caused a large fire within the city. Jump down here into Crimea, actually, and more equipment was spotted moving towards the Ukrainian border. Once again, they're bringing in as much as they physically can for this war. So it's pretty. They're bringing in a very significant amount of equipment and troops to continue to conduct this war. A lot of it, they're starting to bring in even older and older stockpiles. We see T-62s being operated here. We see TUS-7 peons, the older ones being brought in to fight in this war. We've seen stuff from World War One. I mean, some of the rear echelon forces are running Mosin Nagants right now instead of the AK. So, I mean, they're suffering massive shortages. Russia, in no way, shape, or form, was capable to invade this country from the outset with the troops it did invade with, and they didn't even have the numerical superiority that you need for an invasion force. And you see them trying to make that up in shortcomings here, but at this point, they're simply replacing losses. They're not even bolstering troops anymore. And so we're going to continue to see that as they continue to try and replace those battlefield losses. But at this point, they're so numerous. They're suffering a huge manpower shortages, and the Russians know it. And I'm sure we'll probably see some changes in the Russian laws here soon, try and make up for that if the manpower shortages continue, and their manpower issue continues to degrade as it has been. But some of the bigger news of the night here is the Antonovsky Bridge. Now, many of you may already know, unless you're not on anything else that deals with Ukraine. But the Antonovsky Bridge was hit a little bit ago, a couple days ago, and it did some severe damage. It did not collapse the bridge. The one thing we're better at making, or one thing better we're doing as human beings, besides killing each other, is probably building bridges. We've been doing them about the same amount of time. So we're very good at it. It's very hard to knock down something we built intentionally not to fall down. And but all you really have to do is degrade the stability of the bridge to the point that it's no longer viable. Now, it seems that they did somehow manage to get repairs. They probably got some engineer units in there and repaired the Antonovsky Bridge, because it appears that there were some tanks and heavy equipment spotted rolling back across this bridge. Tonight, it appears that the Ukrainian forces have completely destroyed the bridge, from our understanding. There are varying reports to the degree. There is a photo going around. I want to warn everyone, there is a photo going around that shows a collapsed bridge at night. That is not the Antonovsky Bridge. So if you see someone that's showing like, yeah, we collapsed it, that's not the Antonovsky Bridge. There is no visual confirmation of the bridge at this point that we are aware of. That is an old photo that has been stated as an old photo. We know it's an older photo of a collapsed bridge. So we're watching for it. We're waiting to see the Antonovsky Bridge for real being collapsed. Reportedly, it has been. But we do know that there was yet another huge strike on the Antonovsky Bridge. So once again, I don't think those troops going through Melitopol probably have made it to Kherson. So I don't think they have a bridge to cross, or they were destroyed during the crossing. But we can go ahead and take a look at some of this now. So you can see some very major strikes there, striking the bridge. Oh no. Did Woos Brain steal my line? Very nice. As you can see, they really wanted to make sure this bridge didn't exist anymore. So we're pretty sure that this is a HIMARS strike. By the way, this goes on for 1 minute and 19 seconds of them blowing up this bridge. Like, they did not want this bridge left. That's for sure. They were very, very upset that the Russians were using this again. You can actually see parts of the Antonovsky Bridge here in the background, looks like, as it climbs up. The Antonovsky Bridge is a really major bridge. It's one of 2 major bridges that cross the Dnipro River on this side of the front. It's really the only way to get into the other side of the Kherson Oblast and where the city of Kherson actually is. And to destroy this bridge means that there is the flow of the Dnipro River is so fast that that you really can't pontoon across it. It's also a very wide section of the river. Surprisingly, that's where they decided to put the bridge, is right as it gets wide. But this is a very fast running river. It's very fast. If I remember correctly, it actually also, since it feeds directly into like the Sea of Azov right here, and into the Black Sea, what ends up happening is this actually has tidal currents that actually make it even worse. But that's not the only footage. We have some more here. So as you can hear. Now, what did Russia say? They already have a response. They took 24 hours to respond to Vinnytsia. They took over 24 hours to respond to Vinnytsia. They took they took over 48 hours to respond to the missile strike in Odessa, 19 hours after they signed the grain agreement. Well, it didn't take them very long to respond to this one, as we see here. According to authorities in the Kherson region, denied information about the destruction of the Antonovsky Bridge as a result of another shelling by the armed forces of Ukraine. And they also stated, if this will translate for me, thank you. They also stated the destruction of the transport crossing is not true. The press service of the regional administration told RIA Novosti. Says the third time in the last day they tried to launch a missile strike against Kherson. All missiles were intercepted by air defense systems. I don't think they were intercepted by the missile systems as it would appear on the video. I think they successfully intercepted it with the bridge. I believe the Russians did successfully intercept the missiles with the Antonovsky Bridge. Glorious operations there, Russian Federation. Amazing air defense capability. We also know all 4 of your S-300 batteries were destroyed. So, what air defense system? Yes, glorious. Well done. You intercepted all the missiles with the bridge. Congratulations, Russia. Now, the other bridge that Ukraine did hit, indeed, was the one over here. This is one of the inlet. This is one of the offshoots of the Dnipro River. This is called the Inhulets River. This is over by Delrivka. It was cratered, basically in perfect spacing. It was cratered along the entire bridge by Ukrainian HIMARS, and therefore its integrity has also been destroyed, and it can no longer transport heavy equipment across. But the Russians are already pontooning across this one. Just take a look. So this is a car driving across the river here, or across this bridge. They can't transport heavy equipment. Lighter vehicles, though, like your regular cars and stuff, can still go across it. You just can't transport, like, troop trucks and tanks and stuff, because the bridge will collapse. It'll further degrade it. But later vehicles can still go over this. But as you'll see here, as they get to the river, right above these bars here, right across the guardrails, you'll see where they're pontooning across. And it's almost complete. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that they'll be able to cross this tiny river. Congrats, guys. You get to cross this river on this side of Kherson. Huh. Congratulations. You can't cross the Dnipro unless you go all the way down to Novakhovka. So I mean, that's probably what they're doing. Is they're probably setting this up so they can cross. They can cross at Novakhovka, because that's actually a road that's built onto a dam over here. That's why you see the Dnieper River goes from this to this right here, is because this is actually a reservoir. But there's a dam right here, and they have a road that runs on the dam, and it goes across, as well as a rail line. And we know that Ukraine has hit that, so they know that, so we know that it has it sighted in. And congratulations, you're going to cross this tiny bridge. You're going to have to cross at Novakhovka now. Go all the way over here just to reinforce Kherson. When you also have all of this that you have to worry about. Yeah, there's this thing called a fatal funnel or a fatal front that you have to worry about when you're going into a room or something. Like when you're going through a doorway. If every Russian logistical vehicle has to cross this dam, this is the only point they can cross at. Can't build a pontoon here. It's too wide, too fast. Can't build a pontoon across any of this. It's too fast and it's tidal waters. You have to cross at Novakhovka. There is no way around it. You cannot pontoon across any other part of this river. That's a bottleneck. And that means that Novakhovka, that's going to be every Russian logistical capability, ground transport-wise, is screwed for the entire duration of this war. And that's saying that the Ukrainians just don't destroy the dam at Novokakhovka. It would be terrible, but it's their dam, I guess. And they've also told everyone in the Kherson Oblast to leave. They have given the warning, which means that they have done everything they need to under the Geneva Convention to conduct whatever strikes necessary, really, within the Kherson Oblast, because they've done everything they can for the safety of the Ukrainian citizens there. And at this point, it's up to the Russians. It's in the Russians' ballpark. And if they can't do it, as long as Ukraine is trying to minimize civilian casualties, they can essentially strike whatever they want to. They gave the civilians the forewarning. They said a counteroffensive is happening. We don't want to cause civilian casualties. Leave now. And if they haven't, well, that really sucks. But we did the same thing in Fallujah. As the United States, we literally told the civilians, like, you have until this time to leave. And then if you don't leave, like, we're declaring the entire area hostile. And a lot of people left. Some people didn't make the deadline. Everyone was declared hostile in the city. We rolled in there in Second Battle of Fallujah, 2004. One of the bloodiest battles for the Marine Corps since the Battle of Iwo Jima. You jump over here. Another command post was destroyed. The armed forces of Ukraine have destroyed a Russian command post and observation post in the Kherson region on July 25th. And that's coming from Natalia Humanek, who is the head of the United Coordination Press Center of the Defense Forces of the South of Ukraine. Good bit of news up here. Russian kamikaze drone was destroyed here in the Mykolaiv Oblast. The armed forces of Ukraine shot down a Russian drone kamikaze in the Mykolaiv region on July 26th, and that's coming from Operational Command South. But this is coming from the General Staff of Ukraine. But Mykolaiv has received some very immense shelling over the last couple of days. The last couple of weeks have been pretty terrible for Mykolaiv and the Mykolaiv Oblast overall. It's been they've been taking some very serious shelling. The Russians even converted S-300 batteries and S-400 batteries to go from their surface to air systems to now be basically impromptu ballistic missiles that they have been using against Mykolaiv. We know of at least 6 that have struck this location. That was reportedly what the ammunition was being stored at Novokakhovka, which is what that major ammunition depot strike was. And then we can see here a couple of different updates. Quote, the Russian occupiers shelled the Mykolaiv region on July 25th. Local residential buildings and objects of civil infrastructure were damaged. A 7-year-old girl was injured. That's coming from Vitaly Kim. The infrastructure were damaged. A 7-year-old girl was injured. That's coming from Vitaly Kim, the head of Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration. He then gave us another update yesterday, or today, sorry. Quote, Russian aggressors fired 18 missiles into the Mykolaiv region on July 26th. Some of the missiles were shot down by the Ukrainian Air Defense Forces. Once again, Vitaly Kim. And we do have some of the photos coming out of Mykolaiv regarding some of these. You can go ahead and take a look here. And we're talking about very large pieces of ordnance. Ballistic missiles, stuff like this. First of all, you have to understand, like, that's a concrete structure that has been hit. Like, that's reinforced concrete. You can see the rebar in it. It takes an immense amount of power to destroy something like that. And while simply some of this, like, this is an impressive crater, right? But the crater is just a little bit of the blast. When something hits the ground like this, the explosion goes up and out. You have to understand that. It goes up and out. So this is, this isn't the entirety of the blast. This is a small fraction of the blast that actually creates the crater. Like, it went up and out. That's where the majority of this stuff went. And you can see the immense destruction it caused. I mean, this vehicle all the way over here, just look at the front end of that van. It looks like Swiss cheese from the shrapnel. And the overpressure is absolutely immense. If you talk about theater ballistic missiles, there are some that are I believe it's that they will affect. They have enough high explosive equivalents to destroy up to a half mile, or to affect the damage radius is within a half mile of the impact site in all directions. So it like there are some that would take out entire embassy compounds, like the Baghdad embassy. Like one large missile, large enough theater ballistic missile, would just completely wreak havoc on it. So it's an immense amount of destruction, and you can see just Swiss cheese. And these craters are bigger than a person is tall. Jump down here into the city of Odessa, where the UN brings more life-saving supplies into Odessa. They received 27 cargo trucks full of humanitarian aid from UNICEF, and this is expected to provide an estimated 50,000 children that are internally displaced located within the city and nearby areas with life-saving measures, which is pretty awesome. And this is coming from the official UN Twitter here, and the UNICEF website. So, pretty amazing. But that's about where it stops, because unfortunately down here in Zatoka, this is a resort city. And it has been hit by Russian missiles once again. Or I shouldn't say once again, but it has been hit by Russian missiles, likely the Black Sea Fleet. And the damage here is quite immense. It is quite immense. We do not know the casualties at this point. All we know is that the strike has taken place. I'm sure we will get those updates here probably tomorrow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a large-scale act of terrorism. This is a resort town on the Black Sea. What military targets are here that are worth noting? I mean, entire homes wiped off the map. Like, there's... Like... That's 3 different people's houses. Like, that house is completely collapsed. Like, there's probably more where this missile actually impacted. We know there's more. There's a bunch of fire happening right there. But, like, these are people's homes. Crumpled and splintered like toothpicks. Why? What was the point? Truth be told, there probably wasn't one. I doubt that this small resort town on the Black Sea had any significant enough military infrastructure to even be remotely worth it. At all. It was nothing but just a senseless loss of civilian life. But unfortunately, that wraps up everything in Ukraine as we end on that somber note. But we do have more coming from around the world. And we start off by what could possibly be more senseless losses of life as we jump up here into Belarus. The government in Minsk has ordered 1,000 additional body bags. Now, while this can't be for instance, a definitive point. There are no definitive such orders to invade Ukraine at this point. There have been major troop movements of Belarusian soldiers on the Ukrainian border. They are essentially in pre-positioned locations on the border with Ukraine that would put them into a good position to invade with the forces that they do have. And usually you don't order 1,000 extra body bags unless you intend to use them. That's just the reality. Body bags are to put people in. You don't usually intend to use them. So normally you would rather not need to get extras. And there's the official request. So that there can be no mistaking the fact that there is 1,000 more body bags on the way. As you jump over here into Russia, Russia is going to ban all foreign advertising within the country. This is coming from the chairman of the State Duma. There are currently stuff on the table for them to do so. They say that foreign advertising they're doing this in order to support domestic industries and also prevent internal unrest due to Western propaganda. And that's coming from their very own VK post here. We're getting this directly from the State Duma's official VK VK page here, because they never post anything on their actual website. You have to go to their social media. Those who are registered in unfriendly states that threaten Russia should understand that their time is up. The chairman of the State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, commented on the bill adopted in the first reading on the creation of a single operator of digital outdoor advertising. This operator will be contacted to place electronic ads of individuals about goods and services. Basically, the state will have control over advertising on outdoor advertisements in Russia. Quote, "We are preparing the bill. Everything should be done in support to support domestic companies. Everyone who works in this market should be registered in Russia. This is necessary since the issue under discussion is related to personal data," said the chair, quote, end quote, the chairman of the State Duma emphasized. He added that it is also important since advertising can be used to form a worldview and interfere in the internal affairs of the country. Once again, needing to put down that civil unrest. And a chess robot has broken a boy's finger at the Moscow Chess Open. We can take a look at that here. The robot was playing against the child here, and it wasn't going very well. So as you can see, he grabs the piece and then sees the child's finger as the piece and decides he wants to grab that. So it did break his finger. So in case you're wondering, yes, Skynet does have terrible intentions for us as humanity. That's not the only news. Roscosmos did announce that Russia is going to be leaving the International Space Station project. They will not be continuing past 2024, as they will be making their own space station for Russian cosmonauts only. That's coming from, of course, TASS news media agency, who said this in a meeting with Vladimir Putin. And TASS is one of the state-run news media agencies there in Russia. Case and it shows violence in regards to the robot breaking the child's finger. Yes, he was getting very upset that a child was beating it. That's what's happened. We can also see that here, coming from Flash. And of course, Elon Musk has only 2 words: bon voyage. Jump over here into the United Kingdom. Here in London, Zelensky received yet another award as he received the Winston Churchill Leadership Award during a ceremony at 10 Downing Street. You can take a look at that here. So there it is. It's being presented. It's one of the last things. It's supposed to be one of the last things that Boris Johnson will be doing as Prime Minister. He's not really supposed to do a whole lot. He's just supposed to kind of be there to make sure the country doesn't completely fall apart until they choose his successor. But now he's just doing all the ceremonial stuff that a prime minister would normally do. He's staying out of the policies and politics and all of that. So, but I think everyone could have agreed that giving Zelensky this award was worth it. And all of Churchill's family seem to have thought so as well. They jump down here into the Middle East as a result of the Turkish bombing in the Duhok province of Iraq, which is in Iraqi Kurdistan. The Iraqi government has not taken very well to this. In fact, Baghdad in multiple ways has condemned the attack, and they even have called into question the legality of the Turkish incursion, as there is no legal agreement between the two countries existing in regards to the operation. So they do not have... Iraq didn't give them permission to conduct a military operation within its country. The United States does, believe it or not. The United States has one of those. Actually, it does have an agreement with Iraq. When the Islamic State resurged, the United States and the coalition formed, and the coalition was able to get assistance, or was able to secure basically a chauffeur d'armes, I think is what it's called, which is an agreement where another military is allowed to conduct operations on your soil, and that's why Al-Asad Air Base. Al-Asad Air Base is a major hub of U.S. activity, but it's actually an Iraqi air base. Same thing with Taji, same thing with Erbil, same thing with a lot of other locations throughout Iraq. They're actually Iraqi military installations that have a section where coalition forces are at. So Turkey did not join the coalition against the Islamic State. And as a result, they don't have that ability to join in on that. And so them, according to the Iraqi Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is right here, we have that from their official Twitter, spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Ahmed Al-Sahaf, said recording the charge d'affaires of the Republic of Iraq in Ankara and we renew our awareness of the absence of any security and military agreement within Iraq that would allow Turkey to penetrate into Iraq. So basically, what that means is any security agreements, the charge d'affaires, which we have with you, we're pulling that, and then also, there was no agreement that allowed you to conduct military operations on our sovereign soil, which is what the operation from Turkey is. We can get more of that here. Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs files a complaint to the UN Security Council and requests a holding of an urgent session regarding the Turkish act that has resulted in the martyrdom and injury of numerous safe civilians in the Duhok province. So the issue has been taken to the United Nations Security Council for an emergency meeting, which from my understanding is either has just taken place or is getting ready to take place. I am not quite sure. We didn't have any updates regarding it at this point. Here in Iran, flash floods led to nearly 24 people missing and killed. 3 people are missing and 20 are dead after flash floods swept through a dry riverbed near Estekbanat in Iran. And we do have a short video regarding this.
سیل رودبال سیل رودبال بچه اونا رو تو آپارات برین اون طرف نیا اونو با ماشین والا سوال کنم اونی ماشین والا سوال کنم اشتباه بیا پایین بیارش پایین اونو سوال پارده بابا با ما میگیم باور نمی کنین میگیم بلند شین
So it looks like everyone in this area got out safe. But unfortunately, 20 people did die and 3 people are still missing as a result of this. As you jump down here into Sri Lanka, a little bit of uplifting news out of Sri Lanka for once. Sri Lanka has gotten more humanitarian aid, and this actually comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka. So they have received so far 40,000 tons of rice, 500 metric tons of powdered milk, and another 100 metric tons of medicine thus far, all of which are in short supply, as Sri Lanka is going through a very severe economic and political crisis at this point. They did just finally get a new president. The people are still not very happy with who was the acting president, who they're also calling to resign, as that was the former prime minister. But so far it seems like, at least with the assistance from India, that things are a little bit on the up and up, and there is some stuff coming into the country to assist them. So very good to see that. Once again, this is all coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, here in Butembo, here in the North Kivu province of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 3 UN peacekeepers unfortunately lost their lives when protesters ended up engaging them at their UNESCO compound here in Butembo. This comes as a result after 27 individuals since January of the M23 rebel group that are no longer combatants were repatriated with the assistance of the United Nations back to Rwanda. The individuals here, M23 rebel group, which is a Tutsi rebel group, predominantly a Tutsi rebel group, and is kind of a, how do I say this? If you remember the Rwandan genocide or know anything about the Rwandan genocide, it's where the Hutus, which is a large majority of those in Rwanda, killed the Tutsis, who for a long time were in power under colonial rule, and that was the targeted group. One of the reasons for that is because the M23 rebel group was a Tutsi group, predominantly in their ethnicity, and they ended up shooting down the president of Rwanda back in the early 90s and killing him. And that, of course, left a power vacuum that then allowed to the perfect point for the Rwandan genocide to occur. The M23 rebel group is still around. They're still predominantly a Tutsi group, and they are mostly operating within the Democratic Republic of the Congo, especially within this area here in the North Kivu province. And so repatriating these people is very angering, because the M23 operates, like I said, mostly within North Kivu. There's still some actions in Rwanda as a result, but not so much. And the people here are not very happy, especially since the UN assisted in that. So MONUSCO, their compound was attacked. It went from being a protest to protesters grabbed weapons and arms and began to fire on them. And that led to the death of 2 of the UN police and 1 peacekeeper, Blue Hat, who was killed, or Blue Helmet, who was actually killed during this. There were civilian casualties amongst the protesters. We do not know how many at this point. The information hasn't come out, and probably will not come out for some time once those official figures finally get tallied up. We do know that they were using non-lethal ammunition, as well as that turned to live ammunition later, when they started to receive fire on them. And we can take a look at some of the footage coming out from that now. So I want to be clear, when you're seeing shotguns being employed here, what they're doing, we had to do something very similar. I was in charge of anti-armor operations at the Baghdad Embassy compound during the Baghdad Embassy protests in 2020. We had to do something very similar. These shotguns that you're using when you're dealing with a protest like this have a beanbag round that you can use with them. And it's just like a normal shotgun shell, but it fires a non-lethal beanbag round. So shotguns, when they're employed like this, or usually you're using a beanbag round to try and just do crowd dispersion, crowd control.
Kanenda TV okay. Umeona anaua mtu.
I want you to watch the glass panels on these windows here real quick, because it's going to happen real fast. So as you can see, that you can see where the rounds from the civilians who are firing on this has impacted these, and they're now having to engage with live ammunition. And here is that UNESCO upload where they were talking about, this is where they said, since January 2021, the section of the UNESCO has ensured the voluntary repatriation of 96 Rwandan ex-combatants and their dependents to Rwanda. 4 others of the armed group FDLR and FOCA and CNRD joined them on 6/7 last. So we found out where that was going on. So that is the reason for their frustrations. They're very upset with that kind of an announcement. It's obviously a rebel group that terrorizes them quite a lot, and the UN's trying to maintain safety and security there, but it looks like that their mission is quickly going downhill as the civilian population is starting to turn against them. Jump over here into North America, where we have a couple of different developments. The first one here is actually here this is Fort Story, Virginia Beach, Virginia, and the USS Whidbey Island, which is an LSD-41. An LSD is an amphibious assault ship that it's actually the namestay of the class. It's the Whidbey Island class assault ship, and it is being retired and decommissioned. They held the decommissioning ceremony there at Fort Story, Virginia, which that occurred on the 22nd. And at this point, it's kind of weird. Personally, the U.S. Marine Corps is the one who would be using this, as well as the LHD. And the thing is that building these ships takes some time. The Marine Corps has what's currently called the 2030 doctrine, which is the Marine Corps 2030, and what that is they're gearing up for a near-peer fight against China. Essentially, they're planning for an amphibious island hopping campaign in the Pacific. The Marine Corps just had to do a tactical pause on all of its new amphibious landing craft, which is quickly replacing the AAV because of safety issues that occurred at one on Camp Pendleton. Luckily, that one didn't cause any deaths or injuries, much like the AAV that killed several Marines and a sailor. But they are still doing a pause on that. There are still some issues that got to be worked out. And the LSD-41 further, that's a huge loss in capability. Even though it's an older class of ship, I'd say it's inferior in design to the LHD design, which is the same thing as like the Bonhomme Richard. If you remember when that was on fire, that was an LHD. But you're gearing up for a campaign. These take a long time to build, and you're declassifying, or you're retiring one. You're decommissioning it. That's going to degrade your amphibious capabilities quite a bit. In the Marine Corps, I'd say at this point in time, I mean, when you're talking about island hopping campaigns, the Battle of Iwo Jima took 24,000 Marines casualties. Those are just casualties. Okinawa, all of these islands took tens of thousands of Marines landing on these shores. These ships these ships don't have that capability. Not nearly enough troop capacity on these ships to conduct these amphibious operations. It's very much a raiding, operation if you're using this force. Using one of these ships, it's a raiding capacity more than an actual offensive amphibious landing to take an entire island. And that's the thing. I have a hard time understanding the doctrine behind that, or the reasoning. I was actually thinking about this today, before I even read about this, is the Marine Corps simply just doesn't have the capability, I don't think, to truly carry out the doctrine it wants to, or it's trying to. And I think that they need to probably have a good shipbuilding effort to have things like dedicated troop transports and stuff like that back in service as in at least an auxiliary capacity, as opposed to what we currently have now. But that's my personal opinion on that. But I just don't think the Marine Corps is ready for a island hopping campaign against China, which definitely has more of a capability than Japan had. And we finish off here in Washington, D.C. The United States Department of State has denounced the Burmese execution of several diplomatic, political officials, activists. They executed several of them earlier, I believe yesterday, and they are requesting the release of all political individuals. One of the things they're talking about is actually trying to get the region to do an arms embargo against Burma. But the junta, it continues to kind of tighten its grip on power. But this is the State Department spokesperson here talking about the issue.
We strongly condemn the Burmese military's executions of pro-democracy activists and elected leaders. These heinous acts of violence demonstrate the regime's brutality in a new and horrible light, and we remain concerned it also reflects an ongoing disregard for the human rights and rule of law. As reports indicate, the activists were denied legal representation and the ability to appeal. The United States urges all partners and allies to join us in condemning the regime's actions and stepping up pressure on the regime and its supporters. We call on the regime to cease executions, release all those unjustly detained, and restore Burma's path to democracy. We strongly condemn.
That is the Department of State spokesman. But that is actually it for everything in the world today. And there's a ton of stuff that obviously happened throughout the world. And there's a lot of stuff going in Ukraine. A lot of important developments. Fortunately, not usually a lot of good stuff. But luckily, you guys have made this a community where we can help. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never doing anything. When we set out to do this project, like I said at the beginning of the stream, we worked for another YouTuber. And we decided that we didn't want to profit off of people's suffering. So everything we do here is all about charity. And so we want to be able to help people. We want to be the news that gives back. You guys allow us to do that. So once again, no super chats on this channel ever. No merchandising on this channel ever. 100% of what we do is for charity. And hopefully we'll get large enough where we can actually put fundraisers directly onto the stream. But with that, if you check out the video description, you're going to see a ton of different organizations, most of which don't even have a description because there are so many of them now. We love having that problem. When we want you guys to send more and keep sending more, we want to fill up all 50 or all 5,000 characters of the description with different links. And even past that, because we have a website where we can put even more, and Discord. So if you check out in the description below, you'll also find our Discord link. Let a staff member know if you have an organization to donate to, or an individual or anything, because we want to be able to go through and vet those ourselves and get with those individuals, get with those organizations. We want to be able to add, to that list. And 80% or more of all the donations these organizations receive actually go directly to their program or whatever they're funding. Right now, I know that one of them, Come Back Alive, actually just bought a Bayraktar drone. So, and they're sending it to Ukraine. So, like, your money's actually going for something, which is awesome. And it just currently went, if you donated to Come Back Alive, it went to buying a Bayraktar. So, congratulations on the community for helping in that effort. We don't need to know about your donations to the organizations. We really don't. We just really want you to be able to support them. If you can, give a lot. If you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, really the big thing that would help us is giving us a like and subscribe and letting your friends know about us. The more people that are here, the more of a meaningful impact we'll have as a community with these organizations and with hopefully the fundraisers later on. And that's really the whole goal of this. So if you could continue to support us in that endeavor, I would be ecstatic. And I appreciate all the support you guys have already given us. Can't thank enough of the staff. They're the ones that really help with this. They really assist in putting this together. They're the ones really behind the scenes getting all this information, and I just am putting points on a map and talking about it every night. So make sure you give them a hand too. But thank you guys all for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope that you guys have a very safe Wednesday, and congratulations, you made it to the midway point in your week. And hopefully we will see you once again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. With that, my name is Paul from the New News. Have a fantastic rest of your night, guys.